Good Tuesday morning and welcome to Begin in the Word. Our text today comes from the Old Testament book of poetry, Proverbs chapter 10, verses 27 through 30. Solomon says, "The fear of the Lord prolongs life, but the years of the wicked will be short. The hope of the righteous brings joy, but the expectation of the wicked will perish. The way of the Lord is a stronghold to the blameless, but destruction to the evildoers. The righteous will never be removed, but the wicked will not dwell in the land." We began a few days ago explaining this collection of Proverbs as a collection that works in a reverse order. We've already covered the section on the tongue, the first section on personal security, and the middle point of the proverb on laziness, verse 26. Today we look at verse 27 through 30. We're beginning to move backwards now in this reverse order. So we're going back to the subject of personal security. Look at this text. It is in the structure of a thematic parallel. In other words, each of these four phrases are thematic in nature, having to do with security in life, your standing in life, your ability to withstand difficulties versus the failings that the wicked will have. And it's written in a A-B structure. Let me illustrate what that means. So let's think of this phrase as A, this phrase is B, this phrase is A, and this phrase is B. In phrase A, you have the fear of the Lord. And in the second phrase A, you have the way of the Lord. These two phrases work together to create a connection in the content of these proverbs. You have this poetic structure, A and A repeating again in the third line. In the B lines, you have the hope of the righteous. And the second B line, the righteous. And these work to give you the B part of the poetry, A-B. As we've said before, Hebrew poetry, as does Greek poetry, depends on the meaning of the phrases, not the rhyme or the meter, as English poetry does. And so in order to understand the structure of the poetry, you must understand the meaning of the poetry, the meaning of the words. And so you have the first phrase, fear of the Lord, the third phrase, way of the Lord, the second phrase, hope of the righteous, the third phrase, the righteous. The latter parts of these, the B parts of these phrases, however, are all connected by the same content. The years of the wicked, the expectation of the wicked, the destruction to evildoers. Yes, it's a slightly different word, but a very similar word. But the wicked in the fourth phrase. And so the latter part of these phrases are discussing the wicked and give you that part of the content. They are parallel in an antithetic way or opposite way. Let me illustrate down below. Think of two parallel lines, one pointing in this direction, the other parallel line pointing in the other direction. And that's sort of how this works. They're parallel in what they're talking about, but one is pointing one direction, one is pointing in the other direction. In the first phrases of each of these, we're talking about the righteous and the good outcome. In the second phrases, we're talking about the wicked and the bad outcome. And the same is true in each of these phrases. They are antithetic parallel statements or parallel statements that point in opposite directions. It's part of what makes this poetry so beautiful is that not only is the meaning deep and has great application to our life, but it's quite interesting how so much structure is put into this poetry. This wasn't just the ramblings of somebody. This was a work of art that Solomon put together, and we ought to honor it and admire it as a great work of art. Now to the meaning of these phrases. The fear of the Lord prolongs life, but the years of the wicked will be short. This, as with many other things that we've talked about, is an 80-20 rule or a Pareto principle. All of Proverbs work that way. It talks about things that are true 80% of the time versus when they do not apply. This is an engineering principle. This principle applies all throughout life. And Solomon is talking about quite often things that are generally true, that's the outcome. And the problem we have as human beings is we want always the exception to apply to me. We always want to be the 20%. The truth is, we're rarely are we that the minority in this case. It's generally true, which means we need to read it that way. That these are the things that are true to us. While there may be exceptions, they should be considered by us to be the truths that we cling to. The fear of the Lord prolongs life. And think of this not that it makes you live longer, while it might, living a godly life give you long life, but rather think of it like this, that it gives you strength of life, that it gives you prolonged or powerful life, as opposed to the years of the wicked are years that are not filled with power, but are rather short years in that they are not great years. The person that lives a righteous life, their years are filled with blessing. The person that lives a wicked life, their years are filled with pain and suffering. The fear of the Lord and the fear of punishment from the Lord. And so that's what's being stated in this first statement. It's sort of a thesis for the rest of what he's going to talk about, this antithetic parallel statement. The fear of the Lord prolongs life. The years of the wicked will be short. The second phrase, the hope of the righteous brings joy. The expectation of the wicked will perish. Many translations render this, the expectation of the righteous flourishes, or brings about a flourishing. What he's talking about here is, again, a similar concept, is that the righteous will have their hopes realized in their living. They will flourish. Their expectation will flourish. The righteous person knows that, for example, there is a better kingdom waiting. They know that there are blessings in this world and that it was created by a creator who loves us, and there are blessings to be had and enjoyed in this life, but that the ultimate reward comes in the life hereafter. And so the expectation of the righteous is realistic. It understands what is available and is not available here in this life. And so they are able to flourish in their reality of their understanding and the frankness with which they look at life. And because of that, they flourish. Their expectation flourishes in this life because they're living according to the righteousness of God. On the other hand, the expectation of the wicked perishes. The person who turns to drugs, they expect a high. What they end up is in the ghetto doing anything they can possibly think of, including the most disgusting of activities, just to get that next fix. The person that turns to fornication has the expectation of euphoria of the moment. But years go by, and what they find is bitter disappointment. The hope of the righteous flourishes. The expectation of the wicked will perish. The third phrase, the way of the Lord is a stronghold to the blameless, but destruction to the evildoers. Think of the phrase stronghold in terms of a fort or a walled city in the context of the day of Solomon. Armies might invade a city, but if you have a stronghold or a place that is easy to defend, a city with a wall around it, a city with a wall that has towers, where you can have this stronghold, the enemy comes and attempts to attack, you're able to defend off those attacks. The way of the Lord, living a righteous life, gives you a ready defense, a way to defend your life. And as the attacks come from around you, your defense is strong because your defense depends on the way of the Lord, not your own makings. The way of the Lord is a stronghold in your life. Maybe you take positions that are culturally unpopular. If they are positions and beliefs that are based in the way of the Lord, have no fear. You are taking a stronghold, a position that is defendable. Let them cast their darts. Let them say their jabs and take their occasions to make fun of you. That's okay. You hold the way of the Lord, and it is a stronghold, a place that can be defended. On the other hand, if you find justification in your evil, if you find justification in the ways of man, the sins of man. Destruction is certain. Those things cannot be defended. Your place is not a place that can be defended, and attacks will come and you will struggle. Think of Jesus' parable on a person who builds their house on a rock versus a person who builds their house on the sand. The fourth phrase, the righteous will never be removed, but the wicked will not dwell in the land. This is leaning on the land promise to the nation of Israel and the fact that the land was divided up to these various families, and these families would own this land. This land would be their land, and the law protected them so long as they followed after the law, followed after God's righteousness, that they would hold that land. And every so many years, it would revert back. Even if they sold their land, it would revert back to their possession, because there was a belief and an understanding in the old covenant that owning land, especially the land of promise, was part of what it meant to be a person of God. And I would challenge you to think that same way. Think of the promise in Genesis, the first chapter, when God created man, chapters 1, 2, and 3. And he told man to take the earth, have dominion over the earth, and to care for the earth. God gave us this earth. He gave us this earth to care for, to take care of, to farm this earth, to take care of the animals on this earth. Indeed, he gave Adam and Eve the Garden of Eden to dress and keep. And we have that charge for the rest of the earth. Argument can be made that we should be responsible with the earth that God has given us. With that backdrop, that's what's being talked about here. The righteous will not be removed from that promise. They will claim their ownership, they will take responsibility for their ownership, and they will not be removed. That's part of living a righteous life. It's a famous movie that had a line a few years ago. I quote, "You ain't no kind of man if you ain't got land." The grammar may not be exactly perfect in that phrase, but it speaks to this concept of the people of God claiming their place in this world. And if that includes land and ownership, or a place of ownership for you, then so be it. Whatever the case, we have our place on this earth that God has created for us, and in being righteous is how we will not be removed from that place. On the other hand, the wicked will not dwell in the land. The wicked, they care not for the teachings of God, the directions that God has given us. And indeed, the instructions to be caretakers of the land do not come important to them. The wicked will not dwell in the land. Living a godly life gives you personal security. It gives you personal security in filling your life with joy, filling your life with meaning. It gives your life meaning and purpose in terms of being able to defend who you are and what you are. And it gives your life purpose and meaning in knowing your place in this world, having confidence in it, because you are a follower of the righteousness of the Lord. Today, as you go about your day, think about your place in this world and being righteous, and how it gives you standing in God's creation. Thanks for joining us. I hope as you have begun today in the Word of God, you will live out today in the Word of God.